with this whole investigation with Councilman Cliff only in the police department?
Well, there's really two investigations that I asked for. So somebody forwarded me back in March 11th. He was on former Mayor Graham's hotline show, and he had two accusations against the city. One was that there was a directive that was put out, and according to him, either by myself, the city manager, or the city attorney, that department heads were not to speak to him. I'm unaware of any directive. Nothing was sent from my office. So I asked the city manager to investigate that, ask department heads for any emails, text messages, any communications they had regarding this directive that Councilman Only said was put out, because I'm not aware of any. The department heads work directly for the city manager. Traditionally, they can talk to whoever they want. Information is shared. So that was the first point that I wanted the city manager to investigate. The second one is on the same show. He made the allegation that the Watertown City Police Department was corrupt and fabricating evidence. In fact, he said that they had targeted him in his arrest, and they falsely accused him. And then specifically, they said he had said, Councilman Only had said that they fabricated evidence by doctoring the breathalyzer machine. And I think that's horrible. If that actually occurred or happened, that needs to be investigated and looked at. I'm unaware of any of those accusations or concerns, but I think it is horrible. You have a sitting council member accusing our police department. Now, this isn't something, an accusation from 20 years ago. This is an accusation from a couple of weeks ago, that the police department was corrupt and fabricated evidence. So we need to look into that.
How would you look into something that's 25 years old? How would you look back into that?
Well, I think that they would go back into documentations of who the arresting officers were. There would have to be at least breathalyzer or blood test. The court would have documentation. But for something to go that far and somebody be charged, there would have to be the DA involved. I know there was a lawsuit against the city that was dismissed because video evidence exonerated the city. Now, I don't know if the video evidence is still around, but those court documents would definitely still be around. So that will be something that the police department will look into, and I think that's very vital for the community. To have a sitting council member say that the department is corrupt and fabricating evidence, that's something you just can't brush off. Saying that they tampered with and they changed the breathalyzer machine. Those are very concerning allegations, and they should be looked into.
So what would you like to see done? So basically, you're saying that Cliff is known to lie. He's lying about the directive to the manager, to the city heads.
Well, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that he's making those accusations, and we need to see if they're truthful accusations. I know that the accusation...
So it's either going to come out truthful or not, and if it's not truthful, then what would you like to see, or what can be done?
I think one of the bigger ones is if he is fabricating this application against the police department today, while he's an elected city council person, that's very, very concerning, that you have somebody that is making policy, making decisions, lying, and I'm not saying he is, and that's why it's being investigated, but if that's the case, that's something council should consider. It definitely should be a reference to the ethics board.
So do you think the voter demographic has changed, allowing Cliff only to be elected here in the city of Watertown?
I don't think the voter demographics have changed. What I think is that if you look back at the last election, people didn't go out and vote, and this is the importance of people getting out to vote. So his people got out to vote, at least 50 more than Ms. Capone, and I think the number is about 1,000 less than would traditionally come out, is what happened. So there's a case of how important it is for people to get out and vote, and having 20% people show up to vote is just horrible.
So the next question I'm going to ask you is Stewarts. Stewarts has been brought up all week, and it was not introduced, and it was not seconded. And you also, it was resolution 16, and then you made it become the last resolution. Why would you do that?
Well, there was just two simpler resolutions moved up, and it was more of a courtesy move, because the two resolutions dealt with Thompson Park. Mr. Sorrell was there. It was an administrative change done by me, which I can do in terms of that. I knew that if the resolution for Stewarts, I had no idea it wasn't going to be introduced. If it was brought up, it was going to be a lengthy discussion. So just out of courtesy for Mr. Sorrell, that was just the administrative change. It didn't change in terms of time, because I didn't realize that the resolution wasn't going to be introduced.
So why are you against the zone change? Why don't you want Stewarts there?
I haven't voted on it yet, so to say that is not necessarily true. I have significant concerns. Number one is you're changing a residential parcel to now a commercial parcel. There's two sides to every coin. Stewarts and people will say, well, you're cleaning up a corner lot and all of that, and there's truth to that. But there's also then the side of there is a main entrance to this that is going to be on Flower Ave that is not there now. So when people bought homes in the city of Watertown in that residential neighborhood, they bought it with, this is the way the neighborhood is. There's not a corner Stewarts down there. They bought it and there was housing down there. And that's what they purchased property in the city of Watertown in their neighborhood, and they invested in their property. And there's something to be said for, quote, that side of the coin. And the traffic coming out onto Flower Ave is going to substantially impact and change that neighborhood. Nobody can argue that it won't. It will definitely change it. So that is the other side of the coin. I've always said that one of the most difficult parts of the job of city council person or mayor is zoning. It's very hard because, you know, you're not going to make everybody happy. You just aren't. And it's not that you don't want progress to happen. But for those that say, well, it's already zoned, why you're stopping it? Technically, that's not true because we have to do a zone change to let the project happen. So it's not all zone changed properly. The other part is, which people don't talk about, they say it's on Washington Street, but the Stewarts itself and the gas station are all facing Flower Ave. So I would assume if it's facing Flower Ave, it's going to have a Flower Ave East address. One could argue, say, well, why don't they just turn it around, have it face Washington Street, and in and out of Washington Street in the existing property? I don't know if that works for them, but they still would have to go through a special use permit.
Do you have anybody that you know of that's eyeing that property for anything else?
I don't. It's not city.
So it's basically the same situation with
it's not the city's property.
with the Sewell Island. The developer wants to go in there.
There's a difference because Sewell's Island is city-owned property, and an old industrial site was there. This is private-owned property where the private landowner, property owner, decided in their best interest, instead of renovating the houses that were there, that they were going to demolish them. That was a private landowner. That's who owns it now. The city doesn't own it. It's privately owned. So what they want to privately do with their land is up to them in the existing zone.
So I heard you on the JJ show this morning say that this Stewarts thing will be reintroduced, and Clip only brought it up?
Yeah,
Council members?
I've just been looking through emails, and I see Councilman Only has asked for it to be put back on the agenda in terms of the seeker
And do you think he will introduce it this time?
He could introduce it.
Or second it?
No, you can't do both. The same person can't do both.
Right.
So if he could have introduced it the last time, he says he's going to introduce it this time, and there would have to be a second, then you'd have to go through and vote on it. You have to do the seeker before you can consider the ordinance of the zone change.
No.
Let's assume that all that happened, they would still have to go back to the planning board for site plan approval and special use permit approval.
All right, so there is still a chance that Stewarts could still be going there.
There could be, yeah.
Okay. All right, so the next thing is, not in my backyard, the NIMBYs,
Yeah.
that goes along with Stewarts, but the homeless shelter at the old Angels Inn on
There's something
Pine
to be
Street.
said for quote, not in my backyard. So if somebody goes and buys a home in a neighborhood that is zoned a certain way and the character of that neighborhood is a certain way, and then it's going to substantially change, there's a legitimate argument for that is not what I signed up for. That is not the parcel I signed up for. If
So-
I go and buy property or I rent property in a commercial district, you can't complain about commercial activity. If I'm renting in downtown Watertown and there's a lot of traffic and noise and people using restaurants, you can't complain about that because that existed when you went there. If you buy a home though in a residential neighborhood and now all of a sudden that neighborhood is changing, zoning is changing, and the character of the neighborhood is changing, you have a legitimate concern and right to argue about that. That's not what I bought where I wanted my family to be, and when I bought it, that's not what it was.
So News Junkie posted yesterday, the house that's right next to the Angels Inn is up for sale now. Do you think that could have anything to do with the controversy over the homeless shelter?
I don't know, and I don't want to speculate. You have to ask that homeowner. I know that myself and several council members have gotten several emails with concerns, and local area residents that are near that are against it. That is when I brought it up. I said to transitional living and stuff that you might want to get the community involved up front before proceeding with all of these plans to renovate, to have community buy-in of what you're doing. I just think that would be reasonable. You know, in order to have a 9-unit apartments, they had to have a special use permit. Now to have 18 individual rooms for a homeless shelter, they don't need a special use permit. The other concerning thing is at least what I was sent, is that there is a bus stop, a school bus stop, literally across the street.
What does that have to do with anything to do with the homeless people, a bus
Well,
stop?
the concern is who are the people that are
Well,
homeless and what are their problems?
They did give
versus-
you a list of the people who can't or will not be allowed there.
So they did give us a list that if sex offender, if you're making meth, or if you're an arsonist, you couldn't be there. But if you had charges and were guilty of assault and battery, you could be. And I guess you could go through the list. What I would like to know, and I haven't asked yet, so, is apparently they have other homeless shelters in St. Lawrence County, transitional living. How are those setups? What are the type of people that are there? How do they monitor what happens there? Are there police calls? Are there problems there? Are they in residential neighborhoods? Just basic questions of, maybe it's not an issue there, maybe it is, I just don't know, but those should be asked.
So basically, you're not for the homeless shelter. Are you going to vote
No,
yes
no.
for the
So
change?
here again is another concern. Is
Right.
when people buy
When I
homes-
hear you say concern, I hear you say no. Okay.
Well, that's- but it is, it's legitimate. So if you bought a house over in that neighborhood, and you bought a house where there at one time was an assisted living for elderly people, the character, the content of that neighborhood, who is living there, what you bought into, was one thing. Now putting a homeless shelter, now is it transient? How long can they be there? What type of people? What if it's longer? That is a completely different character of the neighborhood. And again, the other side of that coin is, what about that property owner that bought there? So is it we should ignore them and completely care less about what they have to say? Because the majority of people that pay taxes, and yeah, we have businesses and commercial property that pay taxes, but we also want a lot of homeowners that pay taxes. Because they can vote with their feet and move to outside the city of saying, this is not the neighborhood I wanted, put a for sale sign up and go.
Well, it's kind of hard to hear you talk about this tax base when you just rejected, well, not even rejected, you didn't even give them courtesy.
No, Stewarts is
of it.
existing. They're there.
Right.
So, look, you could say yes to
Okay,
Stewarts, and then what happens
someone
when
watching this, right?
What happens when 4 or 5 people down the street move?
right? But
So should
when
we
someone
ignore the
watching
residents?
this, the Stewarts thing,
Yeah.
people are looking at it like there must be something bigger going on. Someone must be eyeing that. There must be a bigger.
That's a conspiracy theory.
That's a
I'm not aware
conspiracy
of.
theory
Yeah.
that you're not aware of. It just
No,
seems a little
there's another
strange.
side. So when people say, "Well, you don't care about stewards," does that mean those people that are yes, 100%?
Mm-hmm.
Can you go to that person and say, "Well, then you don't care about the neighbors. You could care less about what the people that have bought a home, lived there for 40, 50, 60 years, some of them have lived there for generations, or it's been in their family." You're saying you don't really care about them either? Because that's the other side of the coin. That's where it's so difficult with zoning. So you have to take that into consideration. It's hard. That really is hard. It's not easy. Because yes, the Stewarts is a no to those neighbors that are directly impacted. This is an entrance into Flower Ave that does not exist. This is new substantial traffic to Flower Ave that does not exist when they bought their home or the neighborhood they bought into. So does that mean those people don't care about those residents? Or they should have to get over it? That's like saying, well, what if I go and want to put a McDonald's up on Ives Street or Harrison Street? Well, I'll let those people just get over it. No, they bought into a neighborhood that was zoned a certain way, and the character of that neighborhood is no commercial business in the neighborhood. They don't have to worry about traffic coming in and out. So it's not that it's completely, I don't care about Stewarts or people don't care about Stewarts. There's another side of the coin, and how do you balance that? Because it's a substantial change to that neighborhood. And I don't think it's fair for anybody to say, well, the council doesn't care about Stewarts or businesses, because then, does that mean they don't care about the residents? They don't give a crap about the residents on that street?
All right,
That's the other
man.
side of the coin.
Well, I'm glad you took
Yeah.
the time to speak with me.
Always tough questions, never easy, but I'm always willing to talk to you. I've always had
I do
that for 2 years,
appreciate
yeah.
that. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Mayor. See if I can turn this off. How do I do that? Bam.